Hello there, and welcome to this episode. This is going to be the first episode of many where we will talk around account-based marketing, B2B, digital marketing. And today we've got a few people to kick off this series of episodes. We've got Bruce here. Bruce is someone that I've met back when I was working at Genesys. We've set up the proper ABM journey, account-based marketing. We're going to go more in details with this. We actually won an award for this ABM setup, and I think it's something that always stuck to our brain, and it's a practice that we keep on using on a daily basis. So really wanted to deep dive in there, give you guys some insights, some feedback, some ideas, tips and tricks on how to do things better, and just to report some insights from what we see in the battlefield. So yeah, Bruce, nice to see you here. Whereabouts are you in the world, and can you tell us a little bit more around the revenue consultancy?
Sure. Hey, nice to see you again, Paul and Alizée. Great to be here, and really happy to be continuing this journey around ABM, ABX. It has, developed and delivered some great results over time, and it continues to evolve. And I'm looking forward to these podcasts to discuss where at least we think it's going and provide ideas of best practice. So I'm actually living in Canmore, Alberta, which is next to Banff. We're in the Canadian Rockies, and moved up here a few years ago from the Bay Area, East Bay, where I was working for Genesys, and Paul, that's where we met. Really enjoying the development of this space. And as a result of sort of the excitement, I left Genesys and I started a consultancy called The Revenue Consultancy. Very catchy title, but it really does focus on helping companies develop their go-to-market capabilities around marketing, sales, and customer support, really aligning those three practices much more closely. And one of the tools that I've used since our days together, Paul, is account-based marketing, or I would call it accounts-based everything. So Paul, that's where I am today. It's a lovely morning. It isn't minus 40 anymore. It's only minus 2. So much more pleasant than it was a week ago.
That's all right. Yeah, nothing to compare with Alizée, right? I think you're in a different part of the world. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this and around MyDigipal as well?
Of course, yeah. I'm in the complete opposite of the world, basically. I'm in Western Australia, so it's summertime, nighttime, warm temperature, very different from where you guys at. I've been working with Paul at MyDigipal for a couple years now. We really enjoy working with, obviously, the companies we're helping on everything B2B marketing, obviously ABM being a centerpiece of that. So we're going to deep dive into ABM a little bit more in this podcast, obviously, but this will kind of be also showing the work that we've done with some of our partners and companies we've worked with, which we were really excited about. We were able to get great results, great partnerships with those customers. So really excited to deep dive into this topic right now.
Legend. Thank you so much, Alizée. And I'm Paul, CEO of MyDigipal. I'm in London, so in between these two guys, basically Europe, lovely cold London at the moment. It was a fantastic collaboration with Bruce, because I feel like we really represent this sort of anti-agency model where we don't want to go through the fluff. We really want to get things done. And we see that things are changing. And it's really what motivated us also after this adventure with Genesys to set up businesses that can provide true and actionable support to the businesses that we're working on. So Bruce and I are working on two different spaces, but they fit really well with each other. And this is why the topics that we're going to go through today map really well all of the sort of marketing tools, tech stack, ideas that you need to think about. So regardless of where you are at in the stage of setting up your digital strategy, or if you want to pass the second gear on your ABM marketing actions, I would say, the topics here might be relevant to you guys, and I hope that it's insightful. Please don't hesitate to share your feedback around these episodes. It's going to be quite a few series, and we're going to stop dipping toes in each of these topics today. We're going to talk about product-led growth. We're going to talk about how the budget, the teams, the data is changing on a daily basis. What is around ICP segmentation, how important marketing ops can be, and also the holy grail for us at MyDigipal, the Omnichannel Campaign implementation. How could you have your campaigns nicely set up? So that would be too long for one podcast, but at least let's try to tackle some of these topics one by one. And Bruce, I think you wanted to talk to us about the product-led growth, how it's no longer meeting the expectations in some of the companies that used to just do revenue by itself. And at some point, some of these companies are facing a wall. They realize, hey, we need to get a good marketing up and running. We need segmentation. We need ICP. So Bruce, can you tell us how this company can manage this sort of new challenge that's arising?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think, hopefully we've seen the worst of COVID and the back end of COVID, but I think when we were coming into it, everybody, the entire world was in great fear of what would happen, and we survived quite well. And what was really interesting for B2B tech, it was massive tailwinds, because as the workforce went virtual, we had to adopt, and a lot of technology companies, embraced what was a terrible situation, and saw great demand for their products over that entire period. Obviously Zoom's probably the best example of that. And so a lot of these tech companies started depending on and living off product-led growth, because that demand was so strong naturally in the market that people are just looking to find solutions to help them become more efficient, help them, survive through the worst of COVID, go virtual, et cetera. And now that, a lot of the industry is returning to the office, things are renormalizing, call it, in the demand gen space. And we saw, 2022 wasn't exactly a great year in the market for most tech companies. It's really challenging market conditions, and 23 saw a rebound, but mostly that was in the Mag 7. But what most of my customers are seeing today is that strong product-led growth isn't there anymore. And one of the things when I was doing my work that I came across, and being ABM practitioner, and I'll explain the difference in a second, was that I lived off intent. So if you have product-led growth, you have a lot of great interest. You're seeing a lot of intent being demonstrated in the market, and you capture that intent using account-based marketing practices. But intent wasn't showing itself, and product-led growth was not showing itself the way. And what that ultimately means, if you do an analysis on that, you'll find that at any given point in time, most venture capitalists want to see what your total addressable market is. And of course, that is always a massive number. But that number is almost immaterial, from an operating perspective, because what most people have found is who is actually in market, who is showing intent signals and wants to buy. That number is much smaller. In fact, it's something like 5%. Some people say 1%. Some people say 8%. And if that is the market that you can go after, and you need to deliver sort of 20, 30% growth, then without that strong demand that we saw, you need some alternatives in terms of go-to-market practices. So the PLG muscle that we built and we executed on during the worst of the pandemic, just isn't delivering what it should. Furthermore, as we moved to other methods of engaging that demand, we went sort of into sort of a blasting process. So generic outbound at scale, and that generic messaging isn't working either. So two strong muscles that were very dependable have gone away. And finally, if you want to go after that 95% that isn't in market, how do you go after them? And so a lot depend on sort of general brand awareness. But general brand awareness really is often separated from sort of the demand gen aspect. So, it will be the billboards, on the 101. It would be out of home advertising and other vehicles to spread your brand out there. But the connection between that brand development and how that leads to a new account that wants to talk to you, engage with you, and a persona, that's quite separated. So the brand awareness campaigns are not sort of delivering and have sort of not clear connections between the work they do and how they show up in the funnel. So we've got a few challenges out there right now that we're addressing, and that is one of the topics because there are solutions out there, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, all the feedback that you're giving, Bruce, from your perspective is also something that we have seen as agencies when we discuss with clients. We started to realize budgets are shrinking. The teams are shrinking as well. We thought to ourselves, what is happening? And Alizée, can you please tell us a little bit around the challenges where you see that has worked in the past that doesn't seem to work anymore? What are the things that we are hoping to change in 2024 as part of our change management projects with the different companies? What are the differences in between before and what we're seeing at the moment as a result of what Bruce was mentioning?
Yeah, there was definitely a golden age where it was easy to raise money, like marketing teams had massive amount of budget they could spend. They obviously had to show a bit of ROI, but it wasn't really the focus. It was like, you have money, you can go ahead and kind of get crazy with it. Those times are over, or definitely getting more rare. So marketing teams basically are being asked to show results and return on investment. And what we see is a lot of our clients, they are either struggling to generate leads. So they're like, okay, we know we have a good product, we have a good product market fit and so on, but we are struggling to really generate interest. Where do we start? And the second also use case that we see a lot is companies managing to driving or generate leads or prospects or interests, but the quality is just not there. And they're like, oh yeah, on top of the funnel, we're overachieving our targets. We're getting so many leads. We're super happy, numbers are looking so great. But then when we look at SQLs or accounts that are getting converted, return on investment, we're just not getting the expected results. And so this is usually where we obviously step in and try to understand how we can help them. We do see that a lot of the time they feel like they have a good understanding of, their ICPs and the companies and profiles they need to go after and the messaging and so on. But they usually are falling short on a lot of areas. Understanding content, approach, strategy is a lot of areas where we do see that a lot of our clients struggle with. And so we come in and sort of try to understand how we can help them there. There's also a lot of work to be done around visibility, tracking. Obviously, we're now when we're talking about ABX, we're not talking about I'm selling to that one person company, that one guy that I need to convince him, and then it's a short sales cycle. I target him with a couple of ads, he's convinced, he's buying, that's it. We're talking about obviously much longer sales cycles, a lot of decision makers, a lot of touch points, online, offline. It's getting a lot more complex. So you need to be able to track that, and you need to be able to identify clearly how you reach people, on what channel, when, where, and do that efficiently. So there really is a change in just generating volume and assuming it's just a one-to-one conversations to obviously you're selling to an account that represents potential value for you, and you need to engage the right stakeholders at these accounts. So this is definitely something that is a change in terms of mentality, in terms of approach, that is challenging sometimes, but this is where we step into obviously work with different teams and educate them on what it means and the different areas that we need to work on, basically. And so, yeah, ABM is really a change of paradigm, really, with the clients we work with, is stop just thinking about volume, start thinking about revenue, start thinking about quality, start thinking about return on your time investment. Because I think a lot of the things that also we hear is like, obviously, money invested is important, but time as well, right? We're talking about, teams that have multiple people working on those projects, content teams working on content pieces. So you need to be able to justify this. So yeah, definitely something that that we've seen in the space and that a lot of clients are experiencing.
Absolutely. And you talk about time. There is also the tools as well, the systems. Things are changing so much. And we are seeing big ABM solutions that has some strategies. You've got the rise of all these AI tools that's coming in as well. So what are they offering? That's actually going to be the topic of a specific discussion that will be our next episode around intent data, that will have the pleasure to have Bruce and an extra special guest as well to discuss around this. And something else as part of this change, and that's going to be a great transition for us, it's really around the data. And something very important now when we turn to 2024, to the sort of innovations, the different strategies and the changes that we are seeing, ICP and segmentation, getting your data right before you get started on the campaigns. Bruce, can you please tell us a little bit more around your expertise and the challenges that you're seeing at the moment when it comes to segmentation, defining the right ICP, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. And maybe just I don't think we explained it explicitly, but ABM versus ABX. Because I end up dealing with a lot of sales executives, and obviously their knowledge of ABM, the brand recognition is actually very high. There's very few marketing execs, at least in the B2B space, that would not know what ABM is, account-based marketing. But I know we like to use ABX. And just so everybody knows, ABX is really account-based everything. That means that using account-based techniques across marketing, but sales and customer support. And that's where at the start I talked about this critical alignment. So when I tend to talk about ABM, I talk about ABX. Because it's still today, if you talk to a sales exec and you mention ABM, they often think it's this special pursuit of a few strategic accounts with an explicit marketing campaign to go after those, generally large enterprise accounts. And that is definitely not what we're talking about. We're using ABX as a general purpose method to engage your market. So that brings us to TAM, which I mentioned before is a total addressable market. How do you find what that is? Well, obviously you define an ICP, an ideal customer profile. And, I work with CMOs as well, and very often they're very focused on defining that ICP. And that makes a ton of sense because understanding those best fit accounts that you should be pursuing, is critical to how you spend your money, be efficient. And that works all through your business, obviously into product, making sure there's good fit for your product with that market. But what I found is that you can define a really strong ICP, which is great. But then when you use the tools in the marketplace today to discover that TAM, that matches that ICP, the data you get back in return is not great in that it provides too large a market for you to pursue. And so what I also then find is you'll have this very tightly defined ICP. It will pull in way too many accounts or over-defined, and it does not deliver enough accounts. And what's really dangerous about that, and I've absolutely seen this in practice, is that then you'll build a campaign that's very precise, very targeted, messaging is bang on, but you're advertising to 5 accounts. And so that balance of well-defined ICP and over-segmentation is really critical. And from my perspective, you do that at the start of the campaign. But Paul, I know you do that a lot in your practice. So maybe explain how you generate that important balance.
Absolutely. And it's funny how both perspectives match completely in how there is a fine balance that needs to be respected when it gets to segmentation. If you over segment, it's like the ideal ABM. You end up with 100 different buckets. Each of them are super personalized to your audience. You have one campaign for the job decisioner in IT between 30 and 40 years old, who all love the color gray, who are living in Texas, etc. This is fantastic. This is the dream of everybody. And to be perfectly transparent, it's the request from everybody that comes to us when they want to do ABM. However, when you do these sort of things, you multiply the amount of work that needs to be done to personalize each of these buckets. And on the platform perspective, like LinkedIn, Google, whatever channels you're using, you're going to pay much more expensive. So it's more intense in terms of resource. So be ready to have an awesome internal team ready to roll up the sleeve, or a fantastic agency in order to personalize each of these buckets. Plus, you're going to pay much more expensive when it comes to the cost per click. The more targeted you try to be on digital marketing, the more expensive the results are going to be. Let's take the other way around. We push the lever to the other side. If we under segment and we have a TAM list, we hear this sometimes. How big is your TAM list? I've got 10,000 accounts. This is not ABM anymore. This is spray and painting. You're just going to make sure that each and every one of these accounts are going to see your ads once in their lifetime. That's definitely not enough interactivity with the account in order to make it work. We say it takes about 8 to 13 interactions for a B2B decision maker. They need to interact with the different channels that they're going to see in order to remember really your brand. So in order to do that, it's really a matter of finding the right balance. And don't let anybody fool you with some specific numbers. It truly depends on so many variables. How is the competition? What are the sort of verticals that you're going after? What are the most important aspects of the personalization? Should you personalize by the vertical? Should you personalize by the persona that you're working after? And it's important that you equip yourself with an internal team that is familiar with ABM and its segmentation perspective, or an agency, in order to get this right, because it's really going to be the core component that is going to define your account structure on the different channel, your messaging, your content approach, and also the campaign management going forward. So very important topic to be tackled. We will discuss this in an episode as well with CX Ninja, one of our partners that's doing an absolutely fantastic job when it comes to messaging towards other company and how they react to this specific topic. I think they're going to love this curveball that I'm about to throw them. But to bring back to how can we make this work, we talked about the concept, the component of ICP, segmentation, etc. That has to go through the technical aspect, what's happening really in the tech stack of your solution. And Alizée would love to hear a little bit more how these ideas, these concepts that we talked about with Bruce, how can we materialize them into the system with your marketing ops structure overall?
Yeah, I think just to follow up on this topic, there's a few obviously use case or kind of situation we've encountered. I think one is, the people that, I don't know, they are like, oh, last week we spoke to 3 CTOs and they were like, they're our ICP, like we only want to target CTOs. And we're like, well, most likely, a lot of people are going to be involved in the decision making, and, CTO is maybe going to make the final call, but the guy below him is going to use the tool. So if he hates it, like you're unlikely to keep that customer. So it's trying to make them understand that, there's an ecosystem of people. Some will take this decision, some will use the product. And so really building that ecosystem. And so it's really important. What we tend to do now with our clients is to build kind of an audience matrix. So you clearly lay out, the different kind of companies you're going after, personas, and you're really trying to build out the story, right? So it's like if you're reading a book, you're obviously not going to read chapter 15, then chapter 7, and then chapter 23, and then chapter 1. Like, you want things to be in the right order. So that's what we're trying to tell them and to guide them to do, is like, when you want that person to be exposed to your story, you want that to be in the right order, obviously in the right place and at the right time. So being able to do that, you can obviously then build your campaign plan. We tend to want to have like a proper plan that we can compare our performance to. So we work with our clients to build like lead forecasts. So we have our campaign plan. We'll have obviously our monthly budget, or however those budgets are segmenting. We're going to have our channels, and we really want to have an idea of how we are going to benchmark ourselves, and be able to report on that, track on how we're doing. And that's also a good way for us to understand how we can iterate, right? Is like, you start with an assumption, you start with thinking this is going to work. And sometimes you're right, and that's great. And you can even like scale this. Sometimes you're wrong, and you have to iterate, and you have to be agile and obviously like work, and change some of your assumptions along the way. So that's really what we're trying to do. And this is where marketing ops is obviously critical, right? Because if you don't capture the data, if it's not visible, if it's not digestible, this is not something you can do. You just put your finger in the air and hope for the best. But with marketing operations, being able to track, sources, interactions, the cost of everything, the quality of the leads that you bring in, all of this, it really is empowering you to build, but mainly to iterate on the campaigns that you build. So definitely something that we always make sure is properly implemented for our customers. We work super closely with the marketing ops teams as well, and make sure that we have the right KPIs and benchmarks in place so that we can work efficiently, really.
Oh, that's really good. And a wise man told me last week, actually, make sure you have the right metrics in place, but don't be a slave to your data. This person is here in the group. And yeah, Bruce, you want to tell us about this? Because it's right. It's like we hear so much about how the old marketing funnel is dead. However, there's still some metrics we still need to report. How do you see the right performance? The way this is evolving is very interesting. It looks like there are almost two different schools. We believe in a sort of hybrid model where the traditional metrics such as the amount of leads, of MQL, the conversion throughout these different funnels is important. And there are some new metrics that are coming in, which have been launched by the likes of Demandbase and Sixth Sense. We talk about engagement, how much we engage more with the accounts. So it's really two different approaches that we believe there is a common point. There is a middle ground that can be reached in order to make sure that we track the effort. But Alizée, I completely agree with you. Marketing is not a matter of putting the finger in the air, hoping for the best and tweaking some of the numbers. So yeah, Bruce, what's your perspective when it comes to reporting these different KPIs, metrics of success?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I was listening to, I'll mention a couple podcasts recently. One was Christian Walker, and he was talking about, don't be a slave to the funnel, the progression funnel. So MQLs turning into ISQs and ISWs and SALs and acronym soup. And I started thinking about that, and I love MQAs, marketing qualified accounts. So I use those all the time because I see progression more from account perspective than a lead perspective. But he was sort of arguing that you shouldn't even be looking at that because you should be really looking at how a company is engaging with you. And we all know that, accounts and people take different paths. And I agree with all of that. But I'm not willing to throw out my funnel. And just don't be a slave to it is the key point, right? Understand its purpose. And in that respect, I think, Paul, I was talking to you about this. I was listening to, when I'm spinning on the bike or I'm out cross-country skiing, I often listen to podcasts. And I was listening to one by Lex Friedman interviewing Jeff Bezos. And I don't have any strong opinions about Jeff Bezos. Obviously, he built an amazing company. But this podcast I thought was fascinating. It gave me a very different appreciation for this, for Jeff. And one is like amazing, dedication to customer experience. And Paul, you and I haven't come out of that space. That was really interesting to hear. But the other thing that he was, he basically said it this way. He said like two couple things, but one, I believe Amazon has something like 1.4 million employees. And you would still think of Amazon as being a nimble company. And if you think a nimble company can still be nimble at 1.4 million, they got to be doing something incredibly right. And one of the things he talked about is spending a lot of time developing strong KPIs to measure the performance of the business. And they have weekly sit-ins, and that's what they do. They measure how are we performing. But he says, beware of becoming a slave to your KPIs and test to make sure, are they still right? And that may be something we don't challenge enough as we look at those KPIs and say, are they still valid today? I would argue the one that is definitely not valid today is an MQL, a marketing qualified lead. But I'm not saying throw it out. I'm not saying don't measure it. I'm saying be aware of it and notice it, but don't live off it. I've worked on campaigns, ABM campaigns, where the MQL volume is almost zero, like there's not generated because these accounts are being scored up at a broad base across the buying unit, and they aren't form filling, or they aren't converting on your website. You've got an outbound team that is engaging with personas that really have a strong interest. So all that to be said, I would not throw out my metrics, but I would be very careful about how I use them. The other thing, though, I want to talk about, Paul, is, okay, we have defined a good ICP. We can get data on it. We have not over-segmented it or under-segmented, and now we're ready to build our campaign. We've defined a budget and goals, and the number of accounts in that campaign is reasonable, right? Something we can afford to go after. I think the challenge at that point is like, yeah, and I don't think there's a campaign that shouldn't be omnichannel. Obviously, you got to use all the channels at your disposal to engage those accounts and demonstrate relevant messaging to them. But how do you go about portioning the budget? Where do you put your money? How do you know where to put your money when you decide to turn a campaign to live?
Yeah. So first of all the steps that you've done puts you in the top 20% threshold of all the B2B companies that we talk to. Because unfortunately, we see this often. We say, get your ducks in a row first before you get started on promoting your message, etc. Too many people we're seeing are not doing things in order. They want to throw $1 million on LinkedIn ads before they even have tackled the marketing ops, the reporting, the ICP, and the segmentation that we have discussed just before. So we came up with this approach at MyDigipal, the crawl, walk, run approach, doing things in order and increasing your efforts and your budget as things are going. So straight away, when you look at your marketing, figure out where are the quick wins. Are you spending 90% of your budget on a single channel that's not working? Well, let's look at this channel to start with. So always start with the quick wins, because sometimes as part of your existing marketing activity, a slight change in one cog could have some incredible impact. So before you put everything on the ground and start again from scratch, have a look at what would be the quickest win. We always have this graph in mind. It's like amount of effort required and impact generated. Well, anything that doesn't require too much effort and could have a lot of impact, start with this. So it's like you get your duck in a row to get started. Once this is done, you're right, Bruce, a very important portion is allocating the right budget. What we usually do is we start with one main digital budget that we will then split it according to the commercial and marketing objectives. Some companies like to split by region to say APAC should spend only 15%, EMEA 35%. So that's already one layer that you can split. And then most importantly, is the budget split per initiatives and or channel. How much are you going to put on LinkedIn? How much are you going to put on Google Ads, for example? Well, that comes back to what Alizée was mentioning. As part of the lead forecast, you can predict the amount of leads that are required for each of these channels and attach these channels to some specific objectives, such as brand awareness, lead generation, upsell, cross-sell, etc. These variables, the questions that you would have asked yourself as part of the crawl stage, will allow you to do a nice budget allocation. Of course, don't think about it for too long because you will never get the right amount straight from the scratch. And this amount should not be rigid. It should not be set in stone. If at any given point in time, you realize that a specific channel, initiative, or region seems to be promising in terms of performance generated, make a shift in the budget. Really, 2024 has to be the sign of agility and dynamic to be able to change from an initiative to another, depending on what is working and what's not. Another component that's very important to tackle is your internal resources. How much we see loads of companies that are shrinking and shrinking. There were 15 people in the marketing department, and now it's made back to 3 people running the show. So ask yourself, what do you want to keep internal, which is great because you keep ownership of your brand, full control, maybe more agility, versus external, which might bring you the missing part of your puzzle that might be relevant as opposed to recruiting someone. So figuring out your internal resources versus external resources is very important. And then another aspect that we could talk for hours about is really your tech stack. Do you have the right tools? Do you have the right solutions in order to fulfill the objectives that you're trying to go after? And there are millions of them. It's very difficult to know which tool is relevant for you. Some tech stack are crumbling with so many of them. Make sure you've got a simple tech stack that is relevant and solutions that are still updated to the trends. With the rise of AI, you want to make sure that you're betting on the right horse for your upcoming campaigns, marketing ops, and all the plans. Alizée, do you have a feedback around this approach? I feel like there will be so many different tips that I would love to share with our audience today, but only so little time. It could be a good episode to talk about on another one. But yeah, any feedback on this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on something that Bruce said, which I think is also kind of a caveat to everything that you said, because that's kind of the, grade A student. Ideally, we would have a company that has everything in order and do all of that. But I think one thing that's also super important is Bruce mentioned, sometimes you have tons of MQLs and then nothing converts into actual revenue. And obviously there are elements of, responsibility for marketing. Sometimes they're just not the right leads, but there's also a key part, which is the sales and marketing alignment. And they tend to operate in silos. They tend to almost compete sometimes. It's but marketing delivered their MQLs and sales didn't. And sales is but the leads were shit. Sorry, excuse my French. And they're sort of challenge each other, right? And sort of obviously put the responsibility on the other team. So sales and marketing alignment is key. And once again, I go back to my metaphor around the book. If you read half of the book and then it completely changed the story, and then you feel like you're reading a different book, it doesn't make sense, right? So the messaging needs to obviously be consistent across the board, whether you speak indirectly, obviously, to marketing or to sales. It has to be collaborative. Once again, when we go back to also the tech stack, if I'm a salesperson, I'm being assigned an account, I need to have a track record of what have they interacted with, what are they interested in, what have sparked their interests. If I start talking about something that is super irrelevant to them, then I will lose their interest super quickly. If I'm able to engage a conversation around topics they read about, they interacted with, they learned, and were exposed to, I'm a lot likelier to actually, convert them into an account, or at least an interested hot account. So there's really also key elements there is even if you do all the good thing you're supposed to do from a marketing perspective. It really is kind of a company-wide effort, and you really need to make sure that marketing and sales are aligned. Otherwise, marketing can do everything they want and have the perfect campaigns, the perfect stuff. If it breaks at some point, it won't convert into revenue. So yeah, something that we also strongly advise our customers to make sure that they are able to do that.
Yeah, it's surprising how many times there's sort of a lack of awareness of, the marketing campaigns that are being put to market, and the lack of enablement on the sales, especially sales development side. Sales is tending to look and tell me which events, what press releases are we going to put out there, and aren't really aware of the heavy lifting that marketing is doing. That misalignment is, I unfortunately see it quite a bit, and that's just a massive amount of waste, and that's where you get these sort of this competition, and to be frank, often there is real competition because the pipeline is divided into partner source, sales source, and marketing source, and I just think, that is one where I'll dividing the funnel like that doesn't look, again, show it, but it shouldn't be a performance metric, because who cares where the pipeline, and you'll never know, especially in the types of journeys that customers are taking today, whether a partner influenced or marketing influenced or sales influenced. And I just think trying to figure that out, you should know, but to, equate performance against it is just wrong. So good point, Alizée.
Yeah, the sales and marketing alignment. Let's get this battle over with. I think it's over. And ABM is a good central point, to be fair, good common ground for these two teams to discuss. We've seen it in so many companies. It's really like marketing is sending rubbish leads, and then sales is not converting my awesome leads. No, there is a way to make this happen, and that will definitely be the topic of one of our episodes. So
we're all in the same team.
On that, Paul, I just think that's where I guess I became, because my background's all sales, as you know. I only got into marketing about 8 years ago, and when marketing started talking account language, that just resonated so much with sales. Like a lead funnel to me when I was in sales did not mean much, but understanding how marketing is engaging accounts, I could really see how that helps. And that's why I became such a strong proponent.
That's amazing. Perfect. That brings us to the conclusion.
Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure. Great discussion. Thank you to you two guys.
Yeah, really, really fun. Hey, so Paul, I would call this a great start. It's a great high level, but if I personally want to dig into a couple of these topics, because I feel like, what I'm hoping, Paul, is that we make this actionable, just as we have been advising, that we take the next step. So what's up next in the episodes, Paul?
All right. If you ask for it so nicely, it's going to be a nice episode around intent data. We're going to disrupt here. We're going to bring an extra guest. Should I say who, or should we keep it?
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, why not?
Unveiling. So, drum roll.
So it's going to be So the CEO of Relevo, which is an absolutely fantastic AI solution, we're going to have him to discuss around the intent data and how AI is helping for B2B account-based marketing data. This is really some of the challenges that we've mentioned today. Yeah. They need to be actioned. We need to find a solution. And this is a perfect example of us marketeers having challenges to do our job in a better way. And we're going to invite this person who has built a company that seems to be offering a solution. I mean, isn't that marketing should be here for? There is an issue, there is a challenge, bringing the solution. So here we're interviewing, we're going to do the devil's advocate. We're not here to promote this guy. We can roast him and fire him as much as we want. We can really make him a hard life during this episode, but really keen to discuss this topic around intent data, the data for our ABM campaigns, and also what AI has to bring on this standpoint. I'm really looking forward to this next episode.
Yeah, Paul, just on that, I wanted to give a shout out to my client who's just joined, as the new CMO. And just to set the stage for it, because I think you'll love this episode with Ashish. We were building the first, I was helping to build the first campaign. And she tells me, she goes like, look, I like this structure, it makes a lot of sense, but don't depend on intent. And I go like, what are you talking about? I built a career off intent, or at least part of a career. That's concerning to me. And she said, we talked about at the top, you can't depend on intent when intent is only going to, fire up 5% of your TAM, right? So then I was sort of scratching my head. Okay, great, but how do I engage that 95%? And I'll just say it's around buying behavioral triggers, or I call them dynamic ICP markets, very catchy. But those signals that you'll see out in the market that show you that somebody should be engaging with you and going after that. So really moving in the awareness, but targeted to deliver. So I wanted to give the kudos to my colleague and friend at my client for making the introduction. And I think it's really it's solving a big problem, the lack of intent signal. So back to you, Paul.
Amazing. Thanks to you all. For those who's been to the end of this first podcast, don't hesitate, share your feedback, add your comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. I mean, we're having an amazing time recording these. We hope that they are insightful. Please help us making them better as the episode go by. I want us to be at the 100th episode and look back at the first one and laugh at it. So thank you very much for participating to this one. Thank you, Alizée. Thank you, Bruce. It was an absolute pleasure. And we'll see you in episode 10.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Alizée. And again, if there's recommendations too, we're happy to jump on a topic as well. So I'll just throw that out there. So yeah, thanks very much. It was fun.
Thank you both. Looking forward to the next one. Bye.
Cheers now.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.